And in this country, we're focused on one thing, and that is not paying taxes. Would you rather own a gym with 100 kids that makes $1 million a year, or would you rather have a gym with 1,000 kids that loses $1 million a year? If you do think your business is worth, take out a calculator, take that number and multiply it times 10%, because that's probably what it's really worth.
I just heard a whole bunch of bubbles bursting. Sean, I did have a client that was spending $300,000 on travel a year.
Wow, that is a lot of travel.
Hello, this is Andy Seeley, and we're with Creatively Disruptive, and this is another episode of A Family Business. And we're very lucky today to talk to the accountant to the family businesses, Sean Dever, who is it Dever or Dever? When I say
Dever,
Dever,
yeah.
I feel like I'm calling you a diva, but you know, you're anything but a diva. But Sean pretty much specializes in like kids activity centers with a lot of gymnastics gyms and whatnot, and really does know the ins and outs of profitability and taxes and all the ins and outs of what makes a well-run financial kids activity center. And that's why I wanted him to come in and chat with us today about some of the stuff that he sees and his thoughts and all of that. But welcome, Sean. It's nice to see you.
Thanks, glad to be here. It's been a while, and I used to do a lot of these interview type things during COVID, so it's been a minute since we've had these. So I'm happy to kind of be back in this type of forum.
Thankfully, we're in better times than COVID. Thankfully, you're not dealing with some of the stuff that you were probably dealing with. I'd like to think that we're at a spot right now where it's about maximizing good things rather than minimizing bad. Although I know financially, sometimes we've got to be thinking about both, right? So
That's right, yeah.
So in your experience, Sean, working with owners of kids activity centers, what are some of the most crucial financial metrics and ratios that they should be monitoring to keep a business healthy? What basically is a healthy business?
Yeah, I think that's kind of makes up of a bunch of different components. Obviously, the size of the business, what they're providing to the clients, number of staff and so on, that would obviously change what metrics are best to follow. But, you're always going to want to track kids enrolled, obviously. Oftentimes, people are really spearheaded or, they're really focused on bringing new kids into the business. And sometimes they lose sight of keeping the existing kids in the business. So kind of metrics to kind of, I would say to identify both weaknesses and or strengths in those types of things. Obviously the children, if you have a number of families, number of kids that are participating in the program, all the things behind it, the revenue should hopefully come about, the profitability should come about. So, first and foremost is, obviously it's quality of product and quality of program. That's really not something you can wrap a financial number around or stick in a spreadsheet, but certainly tracking your number of kids enrolled, the drop, how many kids are dropping on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. Those would certainly be my preliminary numbers. And then from a profitability perspective, you don't track things like revenue, how much revenue you make per child. Therefore, signing up a new student, is this $1,000 a year? Is it $500 a year? How much type of additional income is that for you? It's all sorts of expense metrics on advertising and marketing costs, rent as a percentage of your overall expenses, payroll is an overall expense, things of that nature. So they all kind of filter out. But again, it has a lot to do with size of the facility, what products you offer. But that would be kind of my initial thinking.
I'm glad that you said that sometimes a lot of gyms are chasing larger numbers of kids, and sometimes to the detriment of the kids that they have. One of the things that we see a lot of is gyms get to a point where they actually can't fit any more kids in a space. And that to me is actually potentially a really good thing for gyms, because what ends up happening is that they no longer are chasing the next 100 kids. What they end up doing is focusing on the program, because that's all they can do, and raising prices, which is actually where all the money is made. Because if you get to the point where you got 1,000 kids and you raise prices by $10 a month, that's $10,000 a month revenue that you've got above and beyond what your expenses, which you're almost, if you don't raise your expenses at all, you've just added $10,000 a month of profit to your business. And in my experience, I don't know what your experience tells you, but in my experience, a lot of, especially gymnastics gyms, definitely some dance studios and so forth, are undercharging and have a lot of opportunity to raise those prices. And looking at the numbers, looking at what you're trying to do, looking at how you communicate with the community through advertising, marketing, or different events and so forth, really makes a big impact on being able to raise those prices. And get to that point of profitability, which unfortunately, in my experience again, and tell me what you think of this statement, a lot of kids' activity centers aren't super profitable or very efficiently run from the point of view of what is the owner getting back from it. So many owners are taking quite a low pay, sometimes lower than some of their staff, just to keep the lights on. When you think about what they're providing for their communities and oftentimes for the kids, it always seems like a little bit of a heartbreak for me.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts there. Pricing, just running the business overall. It's a complicated business. You got a lot of moving parts, big facilities, a lot of staff, marketing, advertising, insurance. Insurance these days, all the different ins and outs of different types of insurance. It's a very complicated business. So you made a comment that a lot of them are underpricing and so on, and that's very valid. As a professional advisor / accountant to our clients, one of the things I spend a lot of time on with my clientele, not only pricing on an annual basis, how much of an increase should we be doing? Is this enough? Same thing on the payroll side. What type of percentage raise should we be offering to our staff? Those are things that we cover regularly with our clientele. I host a conference as well, and that's one of the main points that we discuss. And it stirs up a lot of controversy. It stirs up a lot of feelings, emotions. Again, people get into this business to help out kids, to help out families. It's educational in nature. So sometimes it's difficult to kind of associate it with a for-profit enterprise. And I've had people get very upset with me over the years, whether it be at conferences and this is dance, gymnastics, swimming, martial arts, whatever, pick your product. At the end of the day, some people really have a hard time associating making money off of a kid or off of a family, and I can understand where they're coming from. My rebuttal to that has always been, charge a little extra, make a little more, and then if you want to give back by the way of maybe scholarshiping more kids or purchasing more equipment or bringing in Olympic medalists to talk to the kids and the families, then do it that way as opposed to undercharging, making no money at all, and then,
Right.
It's not really helping anyone.
Right.
So I kind of take it from a different perspective, but I certainly appreciate that it's a tough industry. We're not selling widgets here. We're not making widgets. We're working with families and kids, and I can understand how people are sensitive around that.
I always look at it at this, if you've got someone like me who's coming to your gym with my kid, I'm not there to save money. I'm there to actually get my kid something special and help them be all they can be. And that's worth, I don't even know what that's worth to me. It's possibly priceless to me, right? It's probably a number that I'd go, oh, I'm not going to do it, but it's going to be a high number if I know that my kid's going to be able to develop and be all they can be, which a lot of kids' activity centers can really make a big difference in a kid's life and upbringing, and make someone like me pay and then give back to your community. It's kind of like if you make money, if you're a very profitable, well-positioned financial organization, you can do so much more for your community than you can in organizations that's just scraping by. And for those of you that kind of feel that way that Sean was talking about, I highly recommend that you try to maximize your company financially, because you'll be able to do so much more for your community. Think of things broader and larger than just, hey, I'm just going to charge as little as possible so people can come in. Because here's the reality. People that really are struggling, they're not going to be able to afford anything. So if you really want to help people who are really struggling, charge me through the nose, because I'm there for the program, not for the price. And then you can help the person that needs the program, and it doesn't matter what the price is because they can't afford $1 a month, right?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, parents aren't that naive. They take a look at the price list when they join gymnastics versus dance versus ice skating versus basketball through the town. They know the town program is $50 for the whole season or $100 for the whole season. And they know gymnastics or dance or swim lessons or ice skating lessons are hundreds of dollars a month, depending upon what level you're at. So they get into it knowing they're looking at they're making the decisions on their own.
Right.
They
You're not taking advantage of a night.
They understand what they're signing up for. Are they
Right.
going? Does that mean they're not going to complain? Of course they're going to complain. I'm sure Jeff Bezos, the richest guy on the planet, if you went up $100 a month for his daughter's gymnastic classes, I'm sure he's going to complain too. But at the end of the day, that's just the nature of who we are. It doesn't mean that we don't have the money and that we don't want to continue. It's just who isn't going to complain when you raise the price? So again, I think parents are in tune to what these sports cost and what the overall commitment is.
Right.
So I'm not saying that we want to take advantage of them, but certainly it's an expectation I think they signed on to when they
And
joined
like
the
you said,
program.
raising prices allows you to reinvest in your staff, reinvest in the equipment, improve the quality of the program, make things better for everybody. So I agree with you. There are gym owners that kind of like feel bad about the industry that they're in. They feel like they should be giving it away for free, but it's only hurting your ability to do the thing that you wanted to do. One of the things that was really funny to me at National Congress was watching you eyes bulge out of your head with all of the discounts that were being thrown around a room and one of the discussions that were being had. That's another thing that I think, a lot of times people don't look into, that, you as an accountant probably look at and go, there's real cost here. Where, people think when I give a discount, it's not costing me anything. But if you've got, again, if you're trying to sign, like if we use what I guess that discussion was about, registration fees. And, if you're charging $100 for a yearly registration fee, but you discount it by 50% and you've got 1,000 kids, that's $50,000 cost to you, right? Or what I think they were talking about, you got $100 registration fee and you offer $300 worth of services. That's a $300,000 cost to you. Again, it's like thinking about the profit of the business always seems to me like a secondary thing, or a third dairy or fourth dairy, if those are words that we can use, dairies. I know there is a dairy that I know and he's very much into making sure that things are healthy and profitable. But, when you're thinking about profit, when you're thinking about gyms maximizing that, do you pull your hair out when you hear of these discounts, when you hear of all of the stuff that people throw in? Is that more of a sign of the naivety, maybe, of the gym ownership?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an older man now, so I used to pull my hair out quite a bit. I've pulled my hair out so many times. Luckily, it keeps growing back.
Well, you got a lot more hair than me. I'd love to have your hair.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, for me, there's a lot of immaturity in this industry too. It's been around for so long. And when I meet people, traditionally they don't come from strong financial backgrounds. They come from more educational or teaching type backgrounds. I wouldn't make a decision in an area that I'm not comfortable with. I wouldn't, perform medical procedures on someone other than medical. Very similar, I ask my clients, what made you make the decision to do something financial like that without a financial understanding or background? So I often tell people, before you make any big decisions, and you might think a discount's something that's immaterial, and maybe it is, but it's something you should be running by your professional advisors at all times. Again, if I found out one of my clients was, I think one of the particular scenarios you were referring to was that when we were at Congress together, a woman had raised her hand and said she was charging a higher registration fee, instead of $50, she's charging $200 or $300. And she had said that she had 50% of her client, but she was giving additional things away. She had 50% of her people take advantage of it. Well, 50% of people don't take advantage of something unless you've literally given the entire house away. If you're charging $300 for a $400 benefit, no one is going to take advantage of that. If you're charging $300 and you're giving a $3,000 benefit, well, then everyone's going to take advantage of that. So my gut tells me that whatever that particular individual is offering is way more than what she thinks it is. And that could be a substantial, decrement to the business, have some material, financial, negative consequences. So I always tell my clientele, please don't make decisions on things like that. You want to host a meet, go ahead and host a meet. You want to open up a new class, go ahead and open up a new class. That's you, that's your specialty. But when you start playing around with money, that's something when you need to, talk to people when you're going to change your price. If you're offering a discount, how does this impact you? Maybe it won't, but give me a call, give your advisor a call, say, hey, I'm just, kicking this around. What are your thoughts? And let someone with the financial acumen. I had a client one time drop her prices 10%, I think it was. And, Andy, you made the comment earlier, if you added $10 a month, and you didn't change anything different, and you had 1,000 people or whatever, however the numbers were, you have an extra $10,000 a month. That's true. The opposite holds true. If you give a 10% discount, now her perspective was by doing that, she was hoping more people would come to the facility. And, when I showed her the math, and listen, in the world of retail, if you're offering, at the grocery store, some type of discount at the end aisle, you offer Oreo cookies and, you take 50% off, you may sell 50% more. I'm not sure. But if you give a $10 discount on a class, you need to basically have hundreds of new kids walking in just to make up the amount of loss that you've given away. So when I
Right.
told her that, obviously it was a very disappointed look on her face because she didn't get, I think she said she took $10 off the price, which cost her, she's about 600 students. I don't remember the cost, but it was tens of thousands of dollars. She got 6 new clients or 7 new clients. That's
Right.
nowhere near the impact that she was hoping for. I told her, unfortunately, you need to bring in, I did the math for her, you need to bring in like 120 new students to make the math work. So for that year, she was in a really bad financial spot, and she had to then, the following year, not only go back to where she was, but she had to go even higher to make up some of the
To
loss
make up
that she'd
for the
taken.
deficit. Right. I always say that people don't join gymnastics to save money. They don't do karate to save money. Your parents aren't making the decision to get their kid into an activity to save money. They're doing it for another reason. And if you make decisions to attract people based on price, you're actually on a loser, always. What you're better off, most gyms don't do a very good job of marketing themselves to their community. And obviously it's self-serving for me to say that. Most of you know that we run a marketing company for kids activity centers, but I've actually started to change the words of marketing and advertising to communicate with your community, because there was a congress that I was speaking in, and I said, hey, who likes the thought of marketing? No one put their hands up. Who likes the thought of advertising? No one puts their hands up. Who thinks it's a good idea to communicate effectively with your community? Everyone put their hands up. And I said, okay, from now on, I'm going to use the word communicate effectively with your community instead of marketing and advertising. And we'll just talk about the ways that you go about it. Because most gyms that I see are probably only reaching their pool of parents, which might be the pool of parents that are going to their gym, maybe a few that used to go to their gym, and a couple of their friends. That's oftentimes maybe 5 to 10% of their community that has kids. Time and time again, we hear stories of a parent that comes into a gym and says, I didn't even know that you existed, right? I've lived here 20 years and you've been here 20 years. I've never knew they existed. When we owned our gym, I actually had that. Our gym had been in that location for 12 years and a mom had been there for about 15 years. And she came in, and it's a small town of 25,000 people. And she said, I never knew that you existed. And we did some radio advertising and we started to bring in a whole bunch of people. So there's way better ways to grow your business than to discount. And with that being said, you've emphasized the importance of having a strong advisory team. I think that's really important for us to have a quick little chat about staying on top of the numbers, especially cash flow and reserves and so forth. For owners with limited financial backgrounds, what's the simplest way to maintain a real good pulse on their finances? Because you got to know, right? You got to know what your situation is.
Yeah, I think people spend a lot of time, my clients as well, first of all, they look at their bank account on a daily basis or pretty regularly. We sometimes say managing your business by the bank account. That's not really appropriate, but some people do it. I think people spend a lot of time in their class management tools, the different ones that exist for dance schools, swim schools, so on, gymnastics schools. And they're focusing, those are heavily revenue-based, those are heavily enrollment-based tools and programs, but they're not seeing the bottom line, unfortunately. So They're making decisions, listen, 100 new kids come in, you might say, hey, I've got a whole bunch of extra money, let's go buy some equipment, sign up for some travel, whatever the case may be. But they're oftentimes not looking at the bottom line. So you kind of need to utilize the program. QuickBooks is probably the most common, not probably, it is the most common financial tool that exists. Most of my clients, if not all, are on a program like that. And, we'll meet with them on a quarterly, depending upon if they're using our bookkeeping services or just our tax services, we'll meet with them periodically throughout the year. The key with tools like that is not only to have them, but to be able to, use them accordingly and the right way. So we do get a lot of people who try to manage their own stuff, do their own bookkeeping and so on. And that sometimes creates challenges for, the accuracy of the data. So I would say that's something you want to make sure that you're pretty comfortable doing. If you're not comfortable doing your own medical procedure, don't do your own medical procedure. If you're not comfortable doing your own financial procedures, don't do your own financial procedures. Yep. So, we get all sorts of color and interesting things.
Can I ask this is a question I'm interested in. You might be the perfect person to ask this question. Speaking to the amount of clients that we have, and we have over 120 something clients at the moment, a lot of them don't actually use QuickBooks or any financial system. Is that common? Do you see that a lot in the kids activity center realm, or are most of them actually using some kind of financial system?
Well, we have over 1,500 clients in this particular space, and I would say 100% of them use the program.
Well, when they're not using, before they met you, were they using QuickBooks?
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, I don't know if people that don't use QuickBooks, maybe they don't have accountants. Maybe they don't file taxes. I've met people like that. So perhaps that would be, that could be the case, but
Probably don't have advisory boards.
they definitely don't have any advisory whatsoever, because how could you advise without some type of, help like that? So yeah,
Right.
definitely 100% of our clients, and I would even go as far as say 100% of our clients are using QuickBooks. And we may have a rogue, I think we have one or two clients using, maybe a handful of clients using a different tool, but QuickBooks is definitely the one. And, again, I alluded to earlier, we meet with our clients and talk about pricing and things of that nature. So some people, they're not within our portfolio. They don't, I don't work with them specifically. Even as I mentioned, I do a lot of consulting throughout the year. I host a conference myself. I go to, just like you, the different conventions and conferences, and people oftentimes will say, hey, I saw you're going to be there. Can I buy you a lunch and have you look at my financials? So even people that aren't clients are still walking around with financials there, or at least a computer laptop with something they can pull up.
Right.
And we do a lot of valuations of businesses. Yeah. And so those are all driven by financial statements.
Right,
QuickBooks
and
for
that
matter.
actually brings us to creating budgets and so forth. But sticking to those budgets, if you don't have any financials or any numbers, it's really basically impossible to have budgets and more so than anything, to stick to those budgets. But what strategies do you recommend ensuring that owners maintain some discipline around their budgeting? Because the budgeting and the expenses is obviously half the equation when it comes to figuring out the profit line, right?
Budgeting, let me say, out of my client base, if there were 10% that actually did budgeting, I'd be surprised. So I don't know that a formal sit down on an annual basis and, project outward and putting things down like that. I don't think a lot of them are doing that. That's probably the next level. So when we have owners that have gotten into the business over the years, perhaps they come from a different background, or maybe you have someone who's married to someone and the spouse is an accountant or a bookkeeper or someone with a strong financial background. Those people will have budgetary type meetings and ideas and just budgets to be sticking to. But in large scale, I would say the way our clients budget is they continue to keep track of their expenses throughout the year. We meet with them for however often they need to. We take a look at the current year versus the last year and where we are currently. And then we say, okay, we have a little extra money, or, we're doing a little better than we did last year, or maybe we spent a little more on this than we did in the prior year. So you need to trim a little fat here. Maybe you have a little extra cushion there. And we kind of just tweak it as we go, as opposed to sitting down with a formal, let's calculate our expenses for next year, what they're going to look like,
Right.
how they're going to be, and so on. So in the grand scheme of things, your biggest expenses as an owner, obviously if you get your revenue right with your pricing and so on, then your biggest expenses are going to be rent and payroll. You have flexibility over those. The other items are oftentimes out of your control. You can budget insurance all you want, but whatever the insurance bill comes in as is what you're paying.
Utility bills and
Utility bills, you have no control over those. So at the end of the day, when you take a look at those items, you take out payroll and rent, you take out the items you can't control, your property taxes, personal property taxes, insurance, utilities. There's really not a lot left to the business. You're going to budget office supplies.
control.
That's
right.
Yeah, it's really not going to be too material for you.
Although
So
I did have a client that was spending like $300,000 on travel a year.
wow, that is a lot of travel.
I was like, what? Because we were looking through some stuff. I was looking at selling, and I was kind of getting a sense as to where they were at from a selling standpoint, because their profit line wasn't a lot for what they were doing. And I was like, well, where is all this money going? And they showed me 300,000, basically first class to Europe, first class to this, first class to that.
Yeah.
You add a coach or a family member. I mean, flying to New Zealand first class is about $12,000 to $13,000, there or back. So it can add up.
Yep. Yeah.
Especially if you're staying at
for
the
sure.
Ritz. As a CPA, what steps do you advise kids activity centers who wants to proactively plan for a secure retirement? especially when business is deeply emotional and financially tied to them. And one of the things that I've seen that's a bit heartbreaking is the number of elderly gym owners that end up retiring with nothing, and they end up retiring on Social Security. They oftentimes just shut the gym down and sell it for whatever the equipment's worth at pennies on the dollar. How do we, as a CPA, what are your steps to advise people to avoid that kind of situation?
I'm a big proponent of life as a balance. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. As you're climbing through your ranks, again, whether you start off as an employee, maybe you're a gymnastics coach or something, or an instructor someplace, and then at some point in time you dip your toe into ownership. All along the way, you should be putting and stashing some money aside and maximizing retirement type of accounts if you have them available. This is certainly something, again, that you're building and you're building and you're building and you're building. And then I often say, the gym or the swim school or whatever it is, at the end of the day, if you get to sell that, then that's just gravy on top. I've done, 1,000 valuations in the last 30 years, if I were to guess. I've magically or ironically, I've never given the valuation to someone and they said, oh my gosh, this is more than I was expecting. At least I can't recall that ever being the case. And oftentimes it's the complete opposite extreme, which is, I can't accept this. This is my retirement. This is my nest egg. This is my retirement. And sadly, if it doesn't have value, it doesn't have value. So I would strongly encourage people to be constantly building retirement accounts, taking money away. We use a tool with our clients that, as the business makes a certain amount of money, we have certain levels of cushion depending upon the size of the business and their, annual expenses. And once it exceeds that cushion, that money comes out and is given, as a distribution or some type of draw or something to the owner. And then that money is used or put to work for the owners themselves. Again, retirement planning or whatever they've decided to do from a financial planning perspective. And then again, we use the business really and truly as hey, this is just the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae here. And if you get money for it, great. And if you don't, we didn't count on it.
So being profitable, paying yourself first, and maybe paying yourself in a way that there's a certain amount of money coming out of your business that's going towards your retirement that that's seen as a fixed expense, like your rent or whatever. So you don't even think about it as a variable. Is something you should really be thinking about.
Yeah. There's also something very, unfortunately, a big misconception in the world of small business. This is one of the things in the last several years I really try to emphasize with my clients. The only way to really do what we're discussing is to make money and be profitable. If you make money and you're profitable, that equals tax bills. And in this country, we're focused on one thing, and that is not paying taxes. So oftentimes we have owners who make really foolish, immature, I'll just use the word stupid, financial decisions so that they can avoid taxes. Unfortunately, what that's done is that has caused them to reduce their profitability or eliminate their profitability, which ultimately eliminates any type of, $1 million nest egg at the end of the tunnel. I mean, even to the point where I've had legitimate, smart, educated people say to me, I just want to close my business down because I'm paying so much money in taxes. Or I just want to give my business away because I'm paying so much money in taxes. People don't understand that the government doesn't take 100% of what you make.
It's a bonus.
They take a tiny fraction of what you make. And so if you made
and
$1,
there's different tools that you can help them with to minimize it. It's not avoidance or tax evasion. There's definitely, as business owners, there's lots of things that we can do to bring that number down to something that's reasonable, right?
Yeah.
It goes back a little bit closer to what I was talking about with not using the word advertising and marketing, use communicate with the community. Maybe we should stop using the word taxes and call it like a government bonus. That, hey, the government only gets this money if we do well.
Yeah. I'm not so sure that would be any better, to be candid. But at the end of the day, basically boils down to people just have a huge misconception. So oftentimes, we'll pick up new clients. And sometimes there's a very real disconnect at the beginning where I tell my clients, listen, my goal is to have you pay more taxes than you've ever paid before. And the reason is because my goal is to make you more profitable than you've ever been before. The percentages will be lower, but if you paid the government $500,000 in taxes, that means you've made $2 or $3 million in profit. So I would
Right.
much rather have that. A lot of times people come to me with prior professional advisors who their goal is to have them pay no tax. And there's really only way to pay no tax. There's two ways. One, committing fraud and tax evasion. And number two is to have no profitability. And my focus is not to have you have no profitability.
Sounds sage advice there, Sean.
You'd be amazed at how often I'm looked at very, like I got two heads on my shoulders because I'm talking a different language here.
Right.
But yeah, it makes sense to me for
The beauty
sure.
of America, isn't it? It's like, oh, taxes and government, yuck. Well, with that succession planning, because we're talking about moving on and so forth. So succession planning isn't just financial; it often involves emotional, family dynamics, everything. A lot of times people are founders and they have a little bit of founders syndrome as well. What's a crucial but overlooked step in planning a successful exit or transition from a gym? You've seen a lot of these things happen. When I say a gym, kids activity center.
First and foremost, again, as I mentioned, I've done a number of these over the last 20, 25 years, 30 years. I'd say well over 1,000. Oftentimes people come to me just they want a number and so on, and I tell people, first and foremost, when it comes to businesses like these, this isn't like selling a house. You put it on the market and there's 10 buyers, 20 buyers tomorrow. It takes time. And if you don't have the number that you want, well, there's ways to make that number closer or make that number higher so you can get what you want. But you can't do that instantaneously. A house, you can throw some paint, you can fix the hole in the walls, put in some new windows. That can all be done in a couple of weeks, and you put it on the market and you get a little better price. Businesses take years. The operation cycle is very long. So first and foremost, I would always tell people to be thinking and be planning on how to get out and, when's the right time. And that would kind of be my first thought. The second thought I have is, and now I'm seeing a lot of people exiting in the last, handful of years. We've had some baby boomers that have been in the business for 20, 30, 40 years. They're kind of exiting. So now I keep in touch with a lot of these people because I'm still fortunate enough to keep them as clients on the personal tax side. And I think a lot of them are struggling with being retired. And I would say 20 to 30% of them are now even second guessing whether they should have gotten out in the first place. So I really would say you really want to kick the tires and all the tires to make sure that this is the decision that you want, and then think it through. How am I going to, I have a headache right now, so I want to alleviate the headache. But when I'm on the other side and I got to make sure that was the right decision and it wasn't something very short term. So I think people really need to consider and pause before they continue with the process. And they really need to make sure they've thought through what they're going to do in their afterlife, after gymnastics or after whatever.
Talking again a little bit around that, like you're talking about valuations and and timing and so forth. How should owners think about valuing? Because they're almost always over-evaluated, right? But in their minds, how should they be looking at their kids activity center and valuing it themselves when considering that sale transition before they even speak to you? So they're being a little bit more realistic about what's going on. One of my things that I always say, and tell me what your thoughts is this, is one of the best ways to increase the value of their business is to, as soon as they can, try to, instead of pay rent, pay a mortgage and actually own the building that you're in. Because a lot of the gyms that I see that are super profitable, they actually own the building that they're in, and the only number that changes is their property tax number. They're paying mortgages that they maybe got 15 years ago, and the rent in the area is maybe twice as what their mortgage is now.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts around those valuation things and whether or not owning the property that they're in is a good move for a lot of these gyms?
Yeah, so certainly, from a renter ownership perspective, it's kind of the same as an individual with renting a home or buying a home. Long-term owning your home is, and oftentimes, most of the time, a better financial decision. Same would go with owning a building. Unfortunately, today, buildings cost millions and millions and millions of dollars. So sometimes it's just not within the reach of the owner to purchase something like that. But if you certainly can move in that direction, that would be great. That would have no impact on the valuation of the business. It would be a two separate transaction. The building would have a value and the business would have a value. Not to say that it certainly wouldn't enhance your overall financial well-being, but certainly it would be a different transaction. So certainly a mortgage, if you can pursue that, again, having your eggs in multiple baskets. I own a business, I own a building, I also have some assets and, mutual funds and stocks and retirement accounts and things. I think, personal residential rents and so on. These are all things that make us as individuals, kind of a nice, well-rounded, balanced portfolio. So those are definitely things that I would, consider. Gyms, very simply put, are value based on profitability. Doesn't matter how many kids you have,
Right.
doesn't matter how big your facility is, doesn't matter how many gold medals you have hanging on the wall. And a lot of people feel that those are things that have value. They have zero value at all. It all equates to how much money you put in your pocket at the end of the day. I oftentimes, say to people, would you rather own a gym with 100 kids that makes $1 million a year, or would you rather have a gym with 1,000 kids that loses $1 million a year? For me, I'd rather go with the fewer kids, less headaches, smaller facility, less to clean, fewer equipment items, fewer staff, and I'm making a lot more money. So again,
Right.
size, number of children is really, it's not relevant whatsoever. So the more money you can make, the more your business would be valued at the end. And valuation is not a do-it-yourself tool. There's no real back of the napkin that you can kind of work with. It's a pretty intricate, extensive, lengthy process. I take a solid day, if not a day and a half, to put together a valuation. But if you do think your business is worth, if you've got something that you've construed in your mind, my advice to you is this: take out a calculator, take that number and multiply it times 10%, because that's probably what it's really worth. The owners are always extremely overvaluing what they think their business is worth. So, traditionally,
I just heard a whole bunch of bubbles bursting. Then.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately the worst part about my job, is delivering bad news.
So I've got a couple more questions for you, then we'll wrap it up. But, looking beyond the day-to-day finances, how should owners use cash flow and financial planning to strategically fuel growth? Whether expanding programs, investing in tech, weathering bad cycles and so forth, how should they use their day-to-day, or not their day-to-day, how should they be using their cash flow to look for those future growth and, I guess, rainy day situation?
I like your terminology there, rainy day situation. Every owner should have some level of cushion, and that's based on the size of the business, the magnitude of the dollars, and that should be kept aside to ensure you can pay the rent and pay the payroll and whatever your day-to-day, monthly, quarterly obligations are. Apart from that, excess money, it should be something you're always thinking about. First of all, if you're very comfortable where you are and you're like, I don't want to expand, I'm not interested in adding new products, I'm not buying the building or anything, then that money should be, taken out of the business pretty quickly, as, again, assuming you're not going to need some money in the summer or something like that. And then, that money should then be deployed, again, as we talked about earlier, into your investments, your financial strategies that you and your family have. With that being said, if you are planning on doing so, I need some new equipment purchases, or I'm thinking of doing an expansion, or maybe a second facility, or a new product line or something, well, then those are all going to be things that you certainly want to utilize that cash flow for. I'd hang on to it, not deploy all of it, and then have a strategy, something with a time frame, and then see if you can get that initiated in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
What I don't want to see, I've met people over the years that I pick them up as clients or going through a review of their financials or something, and I see they have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank, and I say, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? We had planned on buying a building or putting on an addition or installing some new piece of equipment or whatever. That was back in 2018 or 2015. That was 10 years ago. Are we still working towards that, or has that ship sailed? So you always want to be constantly rethinking and looking at those and questioning yourself whether it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. If it isn't, then move on to the next project, take that money out, deploy it personally, and reset the bar if you have to.
Right. And I think, again, that comes down to having some good advisory teams. I think a lot of times, especially in the kids activity center realm, it's treated almost like an individual sport, where no sport is individual. Like when we're looking at Usain Bolt running the 100-meter dash, sure, he did it by himself, but he had 30 people around him supporting him to make that happen. Right? It's not an individual thing. In fact, the successful people, they always have a good advisory team around them to help them make good moves. Now, the advisors don't necessarily tell them everything, but they give them good information to make the best decision for them. They don't say, you're not going to ever say to your client, you must do this, otherwise
Sure.
I'm firing you. You're going to say,
Right.
hey, this is my advice. This is why, and this is what I would do if I'm telling you, what the best next move is. And then the client gets to make that decision. But I think if you're sitting there by yourself, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., not knowing what to do, and you have no one to talk to when you get up at at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m., you need to start building that team around you of trusted advisors. I think that's probably one of the biggest things you've said that I think makes a lot of sense. And somebody that you feel like you can talk to. If you've got an accountant that you don't feel that you can talk to, maybe you should look at a different one. If you've got a revenue growth coach or whatever who you don't feel that you can talk to, doesn't really care, find one that does. Find one that meshes with you, right? So, final question. If you could distill one powerful financial lesson or strategy that every kids activity center should implement today, what would that be?
I'll kind of just lean back to the comments that you just stated, which is kind of the theme, a constant theme, which is in these businesses, it's very rare that there's a get rich quick type of thing to do. It's something that you traditionally, again, if you're going to implement an addition or a new building or a new product line, this takes weeks, months, maybe even years to roll out. If you're going to go through a P&L and slice some expenses out, it's not like you can just shave half of your payroll tomorrow or something without having radical ramifications. So getting yourself someone, like you said, someone you can talk to, joining a group of fellow friends, maybe fellow people that are in the same business, or perhaps getting a financial advisor or professional in your team, in your court that you can start these relationships with so that it's someone that can help you in the long term. It's probably what I would suggest. I just can't speak enough about how important something like that is. And it would really help you with, get long-term planning, short-term planning. So it's, from a financial perspective, that's probably the best advice I can give.
Going back to what you said a couple of times, if you feel comfortable doing heart surgery on yourself, then I guess you're a special person, go ahead and do it. It's probably a good idea to get an expert who knows what they're doing to assist you with that, right? So with that, Sean, thank you. It's been lovely spending a little bit of time and catching up with you. We got to talk more often.
Thank you.
I don't like these long periods of times where we don't connect, but hey, it's great to chat with you. It's great to connect. I think you've shared some really good information. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks. And I really enjoyed it.